instead of just telling you things about what I do, why don't I tell you a story? How's that? May I tell you a story? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So this is called Big People on the Airplane. How many of you got on an airplane to come here? Oh, that's a lot of people. I got on an airplane too, but even if you haven't been on one recently, you probably can remember the tiny little space in which you sat for many hours. Yeah. Big people on the airplane. I swear to you, he must measure a full 6 feet, 5 inches. Legs like tree trunks latch into a strong torso with muscular shoulders so wide, there is no way he can stay in his own seat. He has a full head of tousled blonde hair and a still boyish 30-something face, and it makes me smirk to think of the effort he must spend to have a quiet evening home alone. But what do I know? I mean, clearly he spends some time at the gym. Those shoulders are so shapely, he can't miss much workout time. It's a long flight. I look at people. I talk to people. I mean, what else is there to do? People are interesting when they're forced into close proximity, after all. I'm not the only one who thinks so. We are a looking at each other kind of culture. We imagine others' stories, others' experiences. We amuse ourselves with their prospective lives. Oh, but most of us don't merely imagine, do we? We also envy or pity. We lust. We judge. Now, clearly, this man's physique is a combination of genetic propensity and personal choices. His behaviors have enhanced his natural appearance, and it's caused him to not fit so well in the space that the airline has sold him. His seatbelt seems to fit fine, but his legs and his shoulders, they outgrow the space. They push him into the seat next to him and into the aisle. And yet, his seatmate does not seem disturbed. She seems impressed. She's an older woman who looks up at him admiringly. She makes space for him so that he can be more comfortable. Flight attendants seem neither worried about the weight he adds to the aircraft nor how he inconveniences them when they go by with the cart each time and say, "Watch your shoulders." See, I note other people's bodies. We all do, whether we're conscious of our constant assessments or not. It's the relative privilege, merit, disdain, or hatred that we give them that I find worthy of discussion. It's the way we bestow or revoke privilege in subtle ways without even knowing we're doing it. Moreover, I'm interested in how privilege comes to feel normal to a person, so invisible they don't even notice when other people are not privileged. See, I fit into the space that the airline has sold me only a little better than the handsome gentleman across the aisle from me on this flight. My hips are wide and I'm bigger through the midsection, so my thigh and hip touch the person next to me, just as his shoulder and leg make constant contact with the neighboring passenger. My seatbelt fits on this flight, but barely. The tightness of the fit depends on the particular model of aircraft in which the airline chooses to transport us. Some of them are as roomy as SUVs, others as cramped as a speedster. Now, the vehicle choice and size are beyond our control, of course. We show up at the airport and we get on the plane. And yet, he and I, we live on the edge of comfort in this type of public conveyance. We inconvenience our fellow passengers, not because we want to, but because of the diversity of the human body, and because an airline ticket is one size fits all. Some bodies have enough room to shift and lean sideways, reach down for a bag, or pull a knee up to the chest for a stretch. Others must sit very still and feel apologetic. Or not. We inconvenience our fellow passengers through a combination of biology and personal choices. Now see, like him, I am predisposed to physical grandness. 5'9" is tall for a woman, and moreover, my father and my grandmother were big, fat folks too, along with being fit and active. Now, to some, the latter will excuse my physical size, but let's just say I weren't active. Would I be any less worthy of respect and comfort? Really? It's a question worth asking oneself, worth honest reflection. Yes, we are a famine-proof family in a time of abundance. It's amazing to be so blessed. And also, my personal choices, like those of my golden heir companion, make me bigger than I would otherwise be. I eat too much chocolate. Sometimes I eat for comfort. And so do some of my thin friends. You know, I have this beanpole friend who can cake me under the table and never gain an ounce. It's the luck of the draw. We're both fine human beings. We both deserve equal doses of respect. It's just that if we're ever stranded on a mountaintop, my portion of the last granola bar in the backpack will last me a little bit longer. That's all. Now, I'm not doing anything particularly weird when I eat too much at a family dinner or if I have a little ice cream at the end of the day to take the edge off. In fact, I'm following first world standards, doing what's usual in my culture. I'll agree that we could stand to revise some of those practices, and truth be told, I'm pretty good at revising standards and practices. But wow, the fact remains that some people are punished for looking like they eat too much ice cream, even if they don't. Some people will never see judgment on another's face because of what they have chosen to eat. But right now, the issue is space in the airplane. Now, I've heard people speak ill of fat all my life. Some people say it outright, others talk about health and fitness, but they do it in a way that makes their disdain for fat people plain. Sometimes health is a euphemism for standardized appearance. Plenty of trim people aren't necessarily healthy, but that can be overlooked as long as they appear that way. Now, of course, our cultural views on too fat shift with time and culture. But for a man in this culture, too muscular? That's pretty much impossible. Too tall? That's reached by a negligible few. Now, I've heard some angrily opine that fat people shouldn't be allowed to fly on commercial airlines. We're lazy, weak, inconsiderate slobs. We shouldn't be allowed to infringe on others, make the plane too heavy, use additional fuel, drive up prices for everybody else. I've heard these things. Fat people shouldn't assert their right to reach their loved ones, their employment, or their vacation destinations in comfort, and for the same price that a thinner person pays. Meanwhile, I have heard other passengers and flight attendants offer this hulking fellow on this flight sympathy for what he has to endure in the tiny seat that just wasn't made for someone like him. I can hear the barely perceptible admiration in their voices. They have sympathy for his endurance of this seat, the same size seat that the airline sold to me. Now, I can only assume that this is the kindness he has always received, and that he had never wondered why he shouldn't receive it. Indeed, I think he should. I mean, he doesn't have enough space for comfort, and goodness knows, it's never nice to be put in a position to inconvenience others involuntarily. I can only imagine that no one wonders if he had the courtesy to consider his immensity when he chose to spend that extra hour at the gym last week, for example. Does anyone think, should he have thought, wow, I mean, should I spend another hour? I am going on a plane soon. I must admit, I don't think that way either as I polish off a delicious sandwich or a stir fry. Why should we think about these things? We have other matters on our minds. And let's not forget that the airlines also have other matters on their minds. Things like profit There's an industry standard, and within that standard, the obsession is profit. That's considered a healthy obsession for a business. See, some obsessions are allowable, praiseworthy even. Others, not so much. And if the airline can encourage trim passengers to focus on the fat passengers in the next seat, then that takes the focus off of how this conveyance is organized and structured, how we interact with businesses with our full personal power and integrity. The focus on the fat passenger may fuel a little animosity, a little hatred, but it won't be toward the airline, and that's good for business. Oh, that big guy next to me, he may be a monk or a ninja or a spy, rather than the hyper-privileged dandy I assume him to be. He may have a much more interesting story than I can even imagine as I sit here looking at him and watching other people look at him. I'm just looking, speculating. We watch each other for amusement, especially when we're in tight spaces and entertainment is scarce. Looking is one thing, but judging some people worthy of human dignity and other people's not, well, that's a worry. How much space should judgment take up in each of our minds? I don't know. But I know that I am happiest when I spend less time wondering what makes other people less worthy of life's rewards than I. Here's to all of us finding more healthy pastimes, like listening and love and looking for the best in one another. After all, it couldn't hurt to treat other people like they're golden. Thank you. So, hopefully it's getting a little clearer, this business about the way the individual interacts in social settings, right? Because we are never separate from the social sea in which we swim. And when we start to talk about health, I think it's very difficult to separate the effects of fat within the body from being fat within a culture that hates fat people. It's very difficult to separate those things. And of course, there are many different ways that a body can be stigmatized. This is just one. But it's an interesting one, in part because folks who apply that stigma often feel righteous about it, or they feel they're being helpful. And I don't know about y'all, but health and hatred don't often go together, at least not in my experience. So, the body matters. This is part of why I'm telling you this story, not behind the podium, because the body is actually the significant artifact, right? So what does artifact actually mean? It is a human-made thing suitable for future uses, right? That's one dictionary definition. So the body may be natural, but what we make of it for future uses, that's the artifact. So here I am, the significant artifact in front of you.